Hello, everybody, and welcome to Marvel-ous Movie Mondays. I am Dylan, one of your co-hosts.
And I'm Kelsey, your other co-host.
Yeah, we're cutting right to the chase because there's not a lot of Marvel news, so we're going to skip over the news portion. We have a time limit due to just other stuff going on. So we're just going to jump right into it. Today, we're talking about three more of the X-Men movies. We talked about the first three, the original trilogy, last week, and now we're talking about this Beginnings trilogy, which is I believe 2011's X-Men First Class, 2014's Days of Future Past, and 2000 is it 16's Apocalypse? Is it 16? 2016? Do we know?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, pulled those right off the top of my brain. Um,
Good job, Jill. I'm
so,
impressed.
Kels, what are your overall thoughts about the this trilogy opposed to? And I know people are going to say there's a fourth movie, but we're saving that for a later episode. But like this set of three films, what are your overall thoughts?
Right. I mean, I think I like these movies individually more than I like the original trilogy movies, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. As a trilogy, I feel like the original feels a little bit more coherent, a little bit more put together, where this one, has a really good start. Days of Future Past changes everything we've ever known about this
Mm-hmm.
very limited series. And then Apocalypse, what happened? What happened to Apocalypse?
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. Like the first trilogy has like that almost has the same vision. It's like they planned all three movies at once, whereas this it's very much feels like we planned this movie and then it was a success. We'll make another one. What are we gonna do here? And like what are we gonna do? It's not like a well thought out coherent whole. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I like these movies. I think one of the things about X Men that is so strong is the cast, and I think
Hmm.
this cast. I mean, they nailed it. I think. And I think that's one of the major aspects that I think drew a lot of people into this trilogy because they tried the Wolverine thing, which we'll get into next week. Didn't do well box office wise, critic wise. Then they were like, let's revive it. Let's instead go back and just do all of them, just at a younger age. And it honestly works because I think the casting is done well. It's not too
Hmm.
close to the originals where it feels like they're just trying to get the physical they're trying to match a physical. No, they're going for actual actors who can actually bring a lot of weight to the characters rather than
Yeah.
trying to match them appearance wise. What are your thoughts on the cast in general?
I mean, what I was going to say is that what this trilogy I think does better than the original is the casting and the
Mm-hmm.
just like going deeper into these characters. Where I
Right.
feel like with the original trilogy, we're thrown in together all at once. We only really get bits and pieces of their personalities, of how they ended up at the school and being a part of Charles's team. Where this one is like, obviously it's the prequel. It's how everything ended up the way it was. But I think it's so nice to like really dive into like what Professor X was like before he became Professor X. And
Mhm.
like these moments have been so nice. My dog's barking at
I
me
hear
in
the
the
dog.
background.
That's adorable. So the one thing also is like we were talking about with the first trilogy, like I feel like Professor X and Magneto get a lot, but it's more about like Wolverine, Rogue, kind of the new people coming into the school.
Yeah.
And here it's like now we get to really flesh out those two characters because I think those two characters had so much great stuff going for them and they could just explore it even further. And we definitely get that here. So let's jump into this first movie, 2011's X-Men First Class, directed by, do you have the director?
Matthew Vaughn.
Matthew Vaughn. Okay, cool. So Kelsey, give us your brief synopsis that you do every week. So
Sure, you
lovely.
got it.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. As mutants become more prevalent in the lives of humans, Sebastian Shaw aims to start a nuclear war that will annihilate humans and make mutants grow stronger. CIA agent Moira McTaggart and genetics specialist slash mutant Charles Xavier put together a team of mutants to stop him.
Amazing job. So yeah, what are your opinions? Because we've kind of talked about the older characters a little bit. I mean, obviously not in
Mhm.
this context of them being young, but what are your opinions on like the newer characters like Sebastian and Moira?
Right,
Do
right,
you
right.
like the additions, or do you think it's more about like Professor X and Magneto?
I mean, I think that Moira, sorry, I'm going to call her Myra the whole time.
It's okay.
Moira's a good bridge between them
Hmm.
and like the US government, I feel. It's also she plays some sort of like romantic interest to Charles Xavier.
Hmm.
So it's kind of fun to watch them. Sebastian Shaw, interesting villain. What I didn't like about his tactics and what he kind of wants this whole movie is that it's very kind of difficult to follow. So the
Hmm.
his end result is that he believes that mutants became of radiation.
Right.
It's not the X gene. It's not just something you're born with. He thinks that just radiate. Oh my God, mutants were irradiated. And
Hmm.
so he wants to start a nuclear war by kind of, manipulating all these senators into putting US nukes in Turkey so that Russia feels threatened enough to make a deal with Cuba that will ignite World War III. It's not a foolproof plan. If it
Yeah.
weren't a movie, there's a lot at risk here. There's a lot that could go wrong. It's not really cut and dry, his whole
Hmm.
operation here, which is interesting.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed just about these movies in particular, I think because you have this new time period, you can like go back. Like I think there's a lot of cool history woven in. And I think we
Hmm.
saw a little bit of that in the flashbacks, like when Magneto, when he was in his, like in the concentration camps in like the first
Yeah.
X-Men, but like these ones especially, like you see these different eras, and while they don't really go, I don't think they nailed the aesthetic. Like obviously, I think they could have leaned even more into like that 70s 80s aesthetic for both
Yeah.
of these. But I think it's interesting, like wrapping the Cuban Missile Crisis into it, and then wrapping like JFK's assassination into the next one. And
Yeah.
it's very interesting to see how they use that to their advantage. And I haven't read the comics, you haven't. Like where we have been very vocal, like we are not X-Men experts. Like we are
Hmm.
fully just. I'm watching these films for the first time. This is my first time seeing these three films, so it's like it's interesting to see like those parallels and what they do stick with and what they do bend in terms of history. And I think it works for this
Yeah.
universe because they've never really been. It's never really been the type of movie like some Marvel movies where they just jump off the page with like all this color. It's a very much darker story. It's more they try to make it more grounded, more like a regular movie than a comic book movie. But I think this does help achieve that
Hmm.
and keep it grounded. What are your thoughts on the movie itself, just as a piece of exposition? Because we've talked about like origin stories and like how
Sure.
it's hard sometimes with origin stories to kind of tell a new type of origin story without it just being exposition full the whole time. You know?
What I liked about this one and what I was about to say before you even said that was that it really felt like a classic superhero movie. And I
Hmm.
wasn't mad about it because it's like so they have this conflict. They recruit the new mutants into it. Then there's a whole training montage. Then they have to go into the final epic battle where they're all using their powers together.
Right.
It felt like the Avengers in 2012, when we finally see Cap, Iron Man, Thor, all of them working together. And quite honestly, I even wrote down they're working together better than the Avengers did during their
Right.
first gathering because the entire first half of the Avengers, they're all fighting. So it's like
Right.
at least and I love a good training montage. I love how they went to recruit Logan and he just says, "Oh, go fuck yourself." And he
Yeah.
makes a cameo in this
That
film.
cameo is so good because that's their moneymaker, and we've said it the last
Yeah.
episode too. Like Hugh Jackman was their moneymaker, so it's interesting. Like, how do you fit him into this? And the thing is, he doesn't age, so it's also
Yeah.
easy. It's easy to put him into it, but again, we know X-Men 2000 is the first movie where he comes into this whole unit. So it's like, how do we find a way to fit him in? I think between all three movies, they find a really interesting way to fit him in, especially here. Like,
Yeah.
it's a cameo, but it works because it's like it makes sense that they would approach him and he'd just be like, yo, fuck off. And it's interesting too because first off, Disney Plus does not censor. um they do censor a lot of things, but I think they missed an F-bomb in both this and Days of Future Past. I don't think this one's on Disney Plus, but Days of Future Past, when they do bring up this scene and this moment again, they don't censor the F-bomb, which I thought was interesting. So kids, if you're out there and you're listening on Disney Plus, know there is an F-bomb. Parents, know that there is an F-bomb
Oh, wow.
on
I
Disney
didn't
Plus.
know that Disney Plus censored
Well, I
stuff.
mean, like, yeah, if there's like cursing or nudity or whatever, they usually try to censor it. But this one didn't, I guess, because also I think there's a rule like you're only allowed to have, um, if you have more than one F bomb, it's considered an R rating. So if you say
Mhm.
one, it's okay for PG-13, but once you cross two, yeah, like
Yeah.
Lincoln, the Steven Spielberg Lincoln, there's just a random fuck in there, and like no one really, it gets a PG-13 rating. It didn't need to be there, but it's there. It's just interesting to me. Yeah, I love that scene. Um, I think, yeah, I think it runs into some problems with exposition that the first one
Okay.
did, like when we talked about it. But
Sure.
I think it's interesting because you've watched this. The first time you watched it, this was the first one you watched, right? You started with this.
Yes.
So it's interesting because having seen the original trilogy, I think watching this now, it's not just an origin story, but now you can also pull things that you know are coming in the future and you can
Yeah.
kind of piece those together. I think it would be less impactful watching having not seen the original trilogy,
Yeah.
watching this for the first time. I think once you've seen the original trilogy, the Magneto and Professor X stuff works even more, and especially the Mystique stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It works so well because you
Yeah.
know where Mystique ends up, and you know who she ends up with, and who she fights with. So to see her start with Professor X is really, really interesting to see because I didn't even know that because I was wondering last week. I was like, I don't really know where Mystique, like what her background is, and this
Yeah.
film really dives into it. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that whole relationship with the
You
Mystique and
know,
the
this was a love triangle that I felt like they did well
yeah,
because obviously, like
hmm
we see right off the back that Mystique is kind of has this flirty back and forth going on with
hmm
Hank. And then
yeah,
even during like their first really romantic interaction when they're about to have like their first kiss, we immediately see Magneto come in and say something like, "Ooh, kinky." And I'm like, I literally wrote down, I'm like, Magneto is cock blocking right now. And so we kind of
yeah,
see that he's
100%.
kind of going to be this friction in between Mystique and Hank right off the back, but we don't know to the extent of like, because at first Mystique is kind of like really intrigued with the fact that Hank wants to find a cure and he wants to, correct this thing. Like he feels like his mutant ability is something that needs to be corrected rather than embraced. And
hmm
that's something that Mystique struggles with early on in the film. Like even though she looks like Jennifer Lawrence the entire not the entire film, but for the
For a
majority of the
majority, yeah,
film, it's because it is Jennifer Lawrence, but we have to assume that it was Raven who saw that woman and thought that, oh, like that's the epitome of like either perfection or normalcy, whatever in the eyes of Raven, and decided to just manifest that as her out
hmm
physique rather than her blue form.
yeah,
And the fact that Hank says something like, "You're beautiful just like this. Like you will never be deemed beautiful or normal as your blue in your natural form." And then we cut to a scene later, Magneto telling her the exact opposite. Like, no, I want to see you as you. And it was a little strange to see Magneto and Mystique hook up, and just for
yeah,
me, just because it does seem like a big age gap. I don't know if Mystique and Magneto are like that much older than one another, but just the
yeah.
way
Not
that
sure.
Michael Fassbender and how young Jennifer Lawrence looks in these movies, like she's
hmm
still a very young actress,
Yeah,
but
it's
she
interesting
just
because she's supposed to be like the same age, I think, as Charles, and I think Magneto's supposed to be around the same age as well. But it's in the later, well, I guess the earlier movies, the original trilogy, she's
yeah,
much younger than Ian McKellen. So it's like,
right.
and I think that's one of the problems that this trilogy does run into at times is like, well, what have we already established with the other trilogy? Like we'll get into some of the angel stuff later. Like some of it doesn't add up in terms of age. Like how
Mm,
old are they supposed to be? How young are they supposed to be? Which
mhm,
is why Logan's lucky because he gets to be the same age the whole time.
right.
But yeah, and it's interesting because you brought up like Hank and Magneto, but I also think Charles is a factor because early on, when Charles is flirting with Moira, I think there's a little bit of something there with Mystique too. I think that was her first, almost not necessarily love, but almost like a first crush, almost because it was the only male presence in her life that she connected with that didn't see her
Right.
as something wrong. So it's interesting to see how that plays in, not even as just a love triangle aspect, but almost like a friendship to this love triangle. It almost becomes like a rhombus of
A love rhombus.
a
Okay.
love rhombus, even though one end of one corner of the rhombus is like friendship rather than love. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. So I think the best part of this movie is in that last third. I think you get the coolest stuff with like the missiles and then Magneto stopping them and changing them. You see Magneto really have that change into evil. You see him put that coin through Kevin Bacon's head.
Yep.
I forget his
Yep.
name. You're the name girl. So your
Sebastian
numbers and name
Shaw.
girl. Yeah, Sebastian Shaw. I always want to say Sebastian Stan, and I know that's not right, obviously.
No,
Um,
that's
but
Bucky.
but it's interesting because it's like yeah, like it just escalates one thing after another. Just and then when that final bullet hits Charles's back, it's like, whew, it's like that
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
moment where just that's where like I think the magic in this movie is, because you know what comes later, and even if you don't know what comes later, you have a feeling you know where it's going from these moments. And I just think it's an awesome way to incorporate history, build this Magneto as a villain, but also
Mm-hmm.
like have this dynamic with Charles. And I think it only helps Charles in the next film having this, setback to then like be able to explore himself through that in the next film. It's like this ending really, really rocks. And I think it's one of the
Yeah.
strongest endings to a superhero movie, because it takes it beyond the origin story now. Now we're really propelling the story, and now we're really fleshing out these characters just in the matter of 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I agree. The stakes are definitely really high in the last act of
Yeah.
this film because they
Mhm.
literally have like nukes surrounding them on this island. And it's either like the whole world's just gonna go up in flames right now, or we can be the people to save it. And yeah, the moment where he says, I'm going to count to three. On the I wrote it down because it was so epic. On the count
Yeah.
of three, I'm going to move the coin, and he just sends it right through his skull. Honestly, I'm rooting for him. I respect it. I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
I would go after the guy who killed my mom for my entire life and hunt him down like a
Yeah.
freaking animal too.
And it's
I
a
get it,
parallel,
dude.
to the beginning too, because it's the count to three.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
he just uses the same tactic. It's brilliant, and I do think Michael Fassbender. I mean, we'll get into our MVP or MVM, most valuable mutant and least valuable mutant. I did one for each film. I think you did this time as well.
Yes, I did.
But like it'll be interesting to talk, because we're taking that into account of the character, but here we're taking the performances into account when I'm talking right now. And I think Michael Fassbender is, for me, the standout of this whole trilogy in terms of performance. Like his
Mm,
performance is just so good. I mean, we'll
yeah.
get to the stuff in Apocalypse later, but like there's stuff that doesn't work in this trilogy that he makes work because he's so good. And
Yeah.
I just love. I mean, James McAvoy is great too, but like for me, it's like Michael Fassbender has just those moments where it's like, whew, it's like heavy. It's like it's acting that shouldn't be in a superhero movie. Like superhero movies aren't almost like don't require that level of acting
Intensity. Yeah.
intensity, and he does bring it. Like he would a Shakespeare show. So I love Michael Fassbender. He's my most valuable actor in this whole trilogy. But Kelsey, let's
Cool.
get into our most valuable players, or most valuable mutants, or MVMs and LVMs.
I
Who's
would
your
just like to
MVM?
say,
Yeah.
I would
Yep.
just like to say before I say my LVM, who are you looking for? Either?
Either we could start
Both?
with either. Yeah, we might want
Um
to deliver the bad news first. Yeah, we'll start with L.
during the moment where Charles gets struck in the spine and he's
Hmm.
just lying in Moira's arms, I had to write down James McAvoy has beautiful blue eyes. They are just piercing in that moment. I wasn't gonna gush about him this whole time, but I
I was
just
gonna
needed
say
to point that out.
we knew it was coming. I mean, we've seen. If you haven't seen Kelsey's TikTok, people who are listening, it's full of some James McAvoy love. And again, we will expect it. I mean, we'll expect it here. We'll expect it in 3 weeks when we talk about Dark Phoenix too. I mean, it's James McAvoy. You're fair to feel that way, and
Thank you.
no
Thank you
one's
for that.
stopping you for that, because
I'm shameless about it.
during WandaVision I was doing the same for Elizabeth Olsen, so it's fine.
Good.
So who is your? Well, we can start with LVM, least valuable, because I feel like that might be a good way to go.
You
What
know,
do you think?
I wrote this down, and I think she's least valuable because I don't like what the writers and the directors did with this character. And
Hmm.
my least valuable, I did it across the board. I didn't just do it with like the good guys on Charles' team. My
Yeah. Oh
least
no, any mutant.
valuable,
Yep. As long as they're
awesome.
not human, so it can't be Moira.
It's not Myra. It's Emma
Yeah.
Frost.
Yeah.
I just thought it was such a shame that they just made her this like sex object basically when she has like such a cool power. She operates at the level that Charles does, but Charles is written as an intellect, as he's a little bit of a fuckboy, playboy, flirtatious guy in the beginning, which I kind of really enjoyed seeing, as
Because
we know what he
much
turns
he's not.
into,
Exactly.
so it's kind of
Exactly.
fun to watch him just like
Yeah.
seduce these women, like whatever, and like go off and be
Right.
chugging in bars. It's like that's gonna be all of us one day. We're all gonna be old and we're gonna be like, I watched you at a party in college and now you're the CEO of a company. It's like kind of that vibe.
Yeah.
But with Emma, they just they had her basically in a bra and underwear the whole film.
Hmm.
And then I kind of liked how she uses her power to kind of project a version of herself, like especially during that scene with, I think it was like one of the Russian ambassadors or
Right.
something. She's kind of like messing around with him, but it's like a
Hmm.
projection of her, and he's like, they're having this like weird moment on the bed, and she's just kind of like, oh, this guy's pathetic. And like
Yeah.
that's the only part that I kind of felt like a little bit satisfied with, like the way that she kind of uses her sexuality to like fool
Right.
these men, like whatever. But it was just like so disappointing because like she's powerful, you know, she makes herself into diamonds, and it was,
Yeah.
and like the entire time, like Sebastian Shaw would not operate as well without Emma, and she kind of, you know, gets left behind and forgotten a
Yeah.
little bit, which is
And
disappointing for me.
I don't want to be that guy, but January Jones, I don't think her performance is that great. Like I just don't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
I think again it just comes down to the fact that I think just the women in this franchise in general, just for their characters aren't written as well, so they don't
Hmm.
get as much to do. But then again, I mean, I don't want to spoil necessarily my MVP, but it is a female character, so who knows? I mean, some of them are done really well, some of them aren't. We might have the same
Do
one,
we have
but
the same MVP?
let me talk about my LVP
Okay,
real
go
quick,
ahead. Go ahead.
because we got to move on to the next one soon. But I mean, I picked Darwin just because I feel like he's someone who had a
Mm.
cool power, like he does the fish thing, but then
Yeah.
you don't really see anything from him. Like even in the
Yeah.
final battles, he's there, but I just feel like the others just they give more attention to. Even the one who flies, I'm blanking on some names because there's just so many mutants. But like,
Angel?
no,
Are you
the
talking-
one who has
Oh, Banshee.
Banshee. Yeah,
Who
there you
like
go.
screams. Yeah.
Yeah, Caleb Landry Jones, he's great. Went on to be in Get Out and Three Billboards and some amazing movies. But yeah,
Good
like
for him.
yeah, a good track record. But yeah, like I feel like Darwin, like when they're all introducing themselves, it seems like he did stand out. But then later in the film, it's like I just don't think he did, and that's not on him as an actor, as a performer. It's just I guess they
They
just
just killed him off like almost
yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, it's unfortunate,
It
and I guess
sucked.
you have to do that when you have such a large ensemble. You need to have some stakes. You need to kill off a few people. You don't want to kill off the people that you know are going to survive.
Right.
Even though Dark Phoenix kind of does that, and even Apocalypse sometimes, or Dark Days of Future Past fucks with the timeline, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think Darwin was the least valuable. But is our MVP the same person?
Mystique?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
MVP is Mystique.
I love her character in this. I think it's a very
Yeah.
interesting exploration. It dives into the stuff we were talking about last week with X2, with like the human moments that almost symbolize like race relations or sexuality and coming out, or even just being different or having a disability. Like the conversations about that is what I think makes X-Men special, not the action, not necessarily the performances. It's the characters, and then like those moments of accept who you are. It's okay to be
Mhm.
different. And I think
Mhm.
Mystique has a really interesting journey here from being young to finally ending on that beach and deciding to go with Magneto. It's a
Yeah.
really interesting character development, especially since we see that the next movie is almost like she's the thing that they're all trying to get to.
Yeah.
And it's more about like her, not as an object, but like she's the objective for other people. But here it's like, it seems like it's her story, her arc, in relation to everything else.
Yeah. 100%.
And Jennifer Lawrence is great. She's really
Yeah.
good. I mean, she's not phoning it in like we might see in future movies. You know, she's actually happy to be there. You know, she hasn't won her Oscar yet.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
she wins her Oscar between this and the next one, which is interesting. So
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I gave this movie a general score. I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Kelsey, we are on.
Wow.
It was honestly, I had it at 6 out of 10 at first, but then I was like, that last act with everything is just so good. It put it over for me. So let's transition now to the next one, because this is going to require some fun discussion. 2014's Days of Future Past, X-Men Days of Future Past. And as you see by this picture, we got 2 Charles Xaviers, we got 2 Magnetos. What are your thoughts on Days of Future Past? Give us your little summary. Give us your lowdown.
Sure, I'll start. So Days of Future Past came out in 2014. It was directed by a piece of shit, and that's all we have to say about that.
Nice.
Because I as from our last week, I did look into this guy, and he sucks. Just all around sucks.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the art itself, not the artist directing it.
Yeah. So here's my synopsis.
Yep.
When a choice Mystique makes in the past affects the lives of the mutants in present day, Logan is sent back in time to prevent her mistake, thus altering the timeline in the future.
There you go.
And that's as like
base level as you
quick,
get.
I could make it, you
Well,
know?
hey, I mean, not as quick as one character, which we'll get to in a little bit. See what I did there? Yeah,
Yep.
I really dig this film. I think it's a really cool experiment. It feels like they some of these movies feel like there are bits and moments where it's like, oh wait, they didn't really think that through. This movie
Mhm.
feels like every single moment and beat was thought through
Yeah.
3 or 4 times, triple checked. Like it feels so well thought out. Just the different mechanics. Again, it's one of those movies where I think with Avengers Endgame too, if you can get past the logic of the time travel and like the changing and the continuity errors and stuff like that. If you can
Sure.
get past that, it's really enjoyable. It's like a really fun ride. It's cool to see the older characters and the newer characters together on screen. What are your thoughts?
I like this one a lot. I'm looking at my score, and it turns out I really like this one. I agree with you where the last one could have went further with being like in the 60s kind of thing, but where
Hmm.
this one like did not shy away from the fact that like we're in the 70s, like
Yeah.
the costumes and just like the vibe, and like Logan being like pre-experiments Logan, so he doesn't
Mm,
have the metal in him yet. He's still just like rocking
the
with like
bone.
bone
Yeah.
claws. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's very enjoyable. Sorry, I'm trying
It's a
to
lot
think.
of enjoyment.
It's a lot of enjoyment I had with
Yeah.
this film.
Yeah.
Um,
Grammar out the window today.
yeah, exactly. What I didn't like about this film is that the last one sets us up. Like we see the last one we see with Eric is that he's breaking Emma Frost out of jail. And it could almost like I feel like if it was in the MCU kind of movie, that would have been the end credit scene of like Magneto like going to get Emma Frost. And then all the people that he has teamed up with are dead somehow,
Except
some
for
way, somehow,
Mystique. Yeah.
except for Mystique. Like
Hmm.
Mystique is out there, and they broke up. They had a falling out. It feels like a little rough from where we last started to where we ended up. Like Professor X is going through it. He's using his power so he can walk. So he's not as strong as he once was. He's kind of have his drinking problem. The school is shut down. It's like
Hmm.
the last movie really set us up for the next one to like thrive a little bit. But I think they just wanted to create, more layers and more stakes and everything. So they were like, well, what if he gets back in time and like nothing's put together and Professor
Hmm.
X is this way and Magneto is like
Yeah.
not with Mystique and like whatever. So it felt kind of like botched in that sense. But
I'm
other than
wondering.
that, I
I'm
enjoyed it.
wondering if almost they learned from the past and they were like, we just have a lot of characters and some of them just don't get the time needed.
Yeah.
So maybe like let's just roll with a few characters that we know are developed that we can further develop. That's the way I looked at it, but it's a good point. Like it's almost they're replacing this new cast, like some of the new cast with the old cast because they want to get those older people in, and that's fair because it's a cool hybrid. Um,
Right.
yeah, I love how Wolverine's the one to go back in time. It's kind of like what we were saying about how like he shouldn't be the type to be like the dad role. Same
Yeah.
as this, like his type isn't the kind of like Superman, Captain America type. Like I'm gonna go back in time and save everyone. It's very like
Yeah.
cigar. Like I'll do it if I have to. Like it's very cool seeing him be the one to go back and then like him trying to readjust to life. But we also see they rope in all the stuff with Stryker as well in his story, and it's interesting to
Yeah.
see Wolverine deal with that as well because he's the only person who does have that, past and present simultaneously, which is very interesting.
This movie is like I'm looking down at my notes and I'm seeing I wrote this movie starts and takes right off. Like
Yeah.
we start right in the middle of a battle. They're getting their asses whooped. They realize they have to go back in time and change this because they are no match for these Sentinel robots. We just like plow on through. Like we kind of don't always get the beats that we need to like take certain situations in.
Hmm.
Because I'm looking down at my notes and I have a lot of question marks. I'm like, Mystique
Go
and
ahead.
Eric
Yeah.
broke up. Why is the school shut down? Eric killed JFK. I'm like literally scratching down all these like notes as questions as they came at me in the movie. And
Yeah, the
then
JFK
also,
thing was that
yeah,
took me
and
by
then we
surprise.
find out that he wasn't trying to kill the president. He was trying to save him, which is why the bullet
Mhm.
curved. I thought that was so brilliant that they wrote in Mystique to JFK's assassination. Like he was like the bullet curved,
Magneto, not Mystique. Yeah,
obviously. Oh my god, I
yeah,
said
it's okay.
Mystique. I mean
Yeah,
Magneto.
yeah,
Eric.
I knew what you meant.
Um Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Obviously not Mystique. But Charles was like, the bullet curved. Obviously, I knew
Mhm.
it was you, Eric. And he was like, well, it's not what you think. Like, and then JFK, they imply that he's a mutant. So Eric was trying to save him because he's one of their own. Crazy. I love that. And
Yeah.
then, oh, he tried to say, yeah, I literally wrote down, oh, he tried to save JFK because he was a mutant. Eric goes rogue and kills Mystique to protect mutant kind. Oh my god. So that's kind of like the first moment they have a betrayal, because
Mhm.
the first time up until recently we see in X-Men Origins, when Mystique loses her powers, Magneto
First
just
class,
goes,
not Origins, yeah.
no, not the first one. In the original trilogy, when
Oh,
Mystique
like the
loses
first
her
X-Men ones, yeah.
powers.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that's what I meant. Sorry. And Magneto just goes like, "Oh, you're not one of us anymore." And then we
Mm,
see that really in this one really hones in the fact that Magneto is like willing to do anything like to protect mutant kind, and that includes even killing an ex-girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, like ex-hookup, like
right,
whatever they
yeah.
whatever they were, kind of thing. So I loved, yeah, I really enjoyed this one.
Mhm.
All
It's
right.
interesting. I think they learned they got so much backlash for Last Stand that like
Mm,
it almost felt like this movie was like their way to kind of course correct it, but they do it in a really good way. Like it seems like there's an actual purpose. Like it seems purposeful. Like the fact that they mentioned like Beast died, and then you see Storm get killed, and you see Magneto get stabbed. Like
yeah,
that there is a threat,
yeah,
so they at least like make the stakes high enough. They could have easily just been like had some weird excuse to go back in time, but the fact that they actually had a really solid reason to do the time travel, it makes it more worth it that like they do kind of rewrite the timeline. And
yeah,
again,
yeah,
I'm trying to put this in the perspective of someone who's seeing this movie come out, I guess 6 or 7, 8 years after Last Stand, and seeing Scott Summers turn the corner at the end, and
yeah,
seeing Jean Grey standing there. Like I think those payoffs, it almost makes me wish I'd watched these when they came out so I could get that payoff. Because here it's just like, oh, I just watched them last week, but it's like, oh, it's big for them because they were all probably pissed like we were that Scott Summers got so carelessly killed off.
yeah. The shit end of the
So to see
stick.
him back, the only thing is they don't really explain Professor X at the beginning being alive since he also died, but they do show in the post-credit scene of Last Stand that he is alive, but
Yeah,
they don't
no, they
explain
never
that.
explain that.
Um, nor do
It
they
will never be
explain
explained.
nor do they explain how why him and Magneto are like all of a sudden cool. But again, they kind of do because there's a very big threat to mutants everywhere. Um,
Right.
yeah, but I think it's an interesting way to have this story to kind of rewrite a little bit of history and set the franchise on a more positive note while also not doing it so blatantly, um, which I thought was interesting. And we got to talk about the coolest moment of the movie, which is the prison break, because that is the one that everyone audiences were
Yeah.
raving over. And I know you're a
Yep.
big fan, so why don't you give your thoughts on the
You're talking
Quicksilver
about
moment
Magneto breaking out of the Pentagon?
with Quicksilver?
With
Yes.
Quicksilver, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So what a question that I wrote down that I don't think ever gets answered is that Logan knows that Quicksilver exists, and he kind of
Mm,
implies like, "Oh, I know this guy. He's a little bit younger now, but back where I'm from, like he's older then." So he kind of almost sets up that Quicksilver, like he met Quicksilver somewhere along in some other
yeah.
movie, and that never happens.
Never
I
happens.
literally
Yeah.
wrote down Logan knows an older Peter. In what fucking movie did that
Right.
happen?
It's weird.
Um,
Yeah. I don't know. I think yeah, I think they needed a way to get him in there, and the only logical way was for him to be like, I know a guy. It really
yeah,
seemed like it
sure.
because Charles at that point didn't have the
Cerebro.
Cerebro, so he wasn't able to
Right,
like tap into it
right.
because he was using the stuff to make him walk. Um, I think it's interesting. I did read up on Quicksilver, and it's interesting because I think them and Disney Marvel Studios, made a deal, and they basically said, um, we can both use the character, except he can't have the same name. One has to be Pietro, one has to be Peter. They said we this one, meaning X-Men, cannot mention anything about the Avengers, and this one cannot mention anything about Magneto being his dad or the X-Men. So it's they both, I think, utilized their characters well. I think Marvel Studios didn't want to have to run into that problem, so they did kill him off, obviously. But here it's like, no, we're gonna do it. We're just not gonna bring up the Avengers, and it works. I don't think there needs to be too much of that, like, oh, is it the same person as the Marvel one? It's clearly not, and I know WandaVision kind of got our hopes up that it was, but I do think it's definitely a separate Peter, and even
Sure.
just tonally in the way he acts is very separate,
Yeah,
which I
for
like.
sure.
I think Evan Peters gives a great performance, but
Yeah,
just that sequence
I
alone with
agree.
the slow mo and the song playing and him just tapping the bullets away in the air. I mean, it's
Yep.
just so well done. That visual
Yeah.
effects nomination, I need to see what won that year. But I think it should have been. It definitely got nominated, but I think it should have won. Let me take a look real quick. Give us more thoughts.
Honestly, like, I think that yeah, I think that it was super cool. We've never seen, like, someone's powers kinda get used that way and really showcased, you know? Like, this is what I really like about this younger prequel trilogy is that they take time to allow each mutant the opportunity to showcase their powers, where I feel like in the original trilogy, it was all mushed together, and you kind of felt like, "Oh, well, if Scott Summers wasn't here, the battle would go on exactly the same, you know,
Right.
like where it feels like in these movies, like everyone is an essential part in some
Yeah.
way, you know?
Because you need Logan to be the one to communicate it, and then you also need like Charles to kind of be the good cop to Magneto's bad cop, but they're both trying to Mystique, and then Beast is also there because I think Beast is never my LVP. I never made him the LVP, but I think for the overall franchise, he's a great character, but I feel like he's always underutilized just a tad.
Did you say Hank is your LVP? LVM?
No, I said he's not, but I
Oh,
do still think he's underutilized. Like I just don't think they ever fully let him shine. He always just feels like the supporting character who really can't break out. And he almost feels like the Bruce Banner of this franchise where it's like
yeah,
smart,
yeah.
he's very effective, but then like when they just don't let him do as much as he can in this franchise. I did look up visual effects of that year. A
Yeah.
Murderous Row. It did lose the Oscar to Interstellar, which is a beautiful space film.
Mm,
Not surprised. It was
mhm.
nominated against Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and Guardians of the Galaxy. So that is a very
That's a
stacked category.
stacked
Yeah,
visual effects.
yeah.
Um,
What were you gonna say about Hank though? We can transition into MVP,
well,
LVP if
I had something else to say.
yeah.
I forget.
Quicksilver.
Oh, yes, because you were kind of getting like Bruce Banner vibes from Hank. Uh, Logan saying like, "Oh, I know a kid. He's a little bit younger, and like he goes to get Peter," was the exact same vibe as Tony being like, "I
Spider-Man.
know a guy," and then boom, cuts to "and your left hand's free." We're in Queens.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I agree. There's a lot of good parallels, and I think that's just the nature of comic books themselves. Is you got to have that like little kid who's just kind of like a little bit of a troublemaker, but it means well, has a good heart.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
Mhm.
So yeah, I kind of gave it away when I thought you said that your LVM was Hank, but my LVM was Hank, and
Okay.
because I just feel like I don't know, he didn't do much for me in this film. He could have not been in it, and the film would have operated as normal. I feel
Yeah.
like the only reason why he was in it is because they have Kelsey Grammer play him in the original
Hmm.
trilogy. You know, like
Yeah, and
it
he's a
was
cool character.
yeah.
Like he's got the blue fur, and we didn't mention when we talked about First Class that scene where he becomes Beast is so cool. It's almost like that Hulk moment and the like the witch in Snow White. Like it's one of those really cool like transformation sequences.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Like they don't fully. I just feel like he has a bigger purpose, but they just don't let him get there as a character. And Nicholas Holt is great too, but I just feel like they always
Yeah,
hold him back.
for
Yeah,
sure. He was much better and more entertaining in First Class, but in this one he just felt completely neglected.
I
So
agree.
I had
Yeah.
to give him my LVM. What about you,
Okay.
Dill?
My LVM is Storm. We talked about it a little last week. I just feel like her powers are cool, but they don't really emphasize on them a ton. And
Oh,
then
really? Interesting.
when they're there, she's like guarding the front. Four people walk in. It's Magneto, Charles. Well, he doesn't walk, but Charles, Logan, and
Okay.
Storm. Those are the four who walk in and greet Kitty and Iceman and the other people who are there, and they're the ones who are like, listen, we have this plan and we need to do this, and it's Charles's plan, but she's standing there and she just barely talks. And then they kind of like they're all inside doing their thing, and she's just sent outside to kind of stand guard. We see her a little bit standing guard, but then we just see her die. And it's like I
Hmm.
get that's the purpose is to be like, no, these are coming, like they're dying, like this is what's happened to Beast, this is what's happened to a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But it's like you're bringing back this crew probably for the last time, except for Logan and Professor X, because we'll see them in Logan, the movie Logan. This is your last time. Halle Berry is now a very big superstar. She was a big superstar when the last X-Men movies came out. Like, she always feels underutilized, especially here where it's like this grand return. And I have to say, there was also a lot of Rogue that was cut from this movie. Rogue had a big plot line. There's actually a cut on Blu-ray called the Rogue Cut, and it is 20 minutes longer, and it's all of her scenes back in because she apparently was also there. They reshot the scenes because they felt like it didn't need to be there, the plot line, but there was a plot line with Rogue where she also was part of this mission, and she had other agendas as well. Maybe
Did she have her powers? Because she
that I
took
don't
the
know. I haven't seen it.
vaccine.
I haven't seen it, so I don't know. Maybe it's for her to get the powers back or something. Maybe she wants to turn back time because, as we see, Jean and Scott survive. So maybe going back in time would also give her powers back. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I see, because you see her at the very end.
We see her at the very end, but I think her and Bobby like hold hands.
Yeah.
So I think she doesn't have her powers.
Oh, maybe. But
Because
either way,
she's touching him.
Yeah, either way, there is a Rogue cut. So I want to check that out eventually someday because there's a whole cut. They cut all of Rogue stuff from the movie. But yeah, I think Storm, it almost feels like they had more of Storm that they cut, but they didn't. And I think that just makes her the least valuable in terms of the story itself and just everything going on. It's just like, for all these characters to return, she just seems like the most underwhelming because they just don't really do anything with her return, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that.
Who's your MVP? Because I have two.
Okay, my MVM is Charles.
Okay, he's one of mine. Yeah.
Okay, who's your other?
My other is Logan because he's the one who actually goes on the mission.
Okay,
and I think it's important. Like, he is the reason why it pulls off. But I think I agree with you for the actual story aspect. Like, Charles, this is Charles's story. This is Charles' movie. This is where young Charles finds himself. This is where old Charles is able to basically save the world. So yeah, talk about Charles because you brought him up first.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it was cool to kind of watch him overcome something where you meet him in the original trilogy and he's already very well adjusted. He's the moral compass. He's like the grandfather for all these students now. Like he's, this just beacon of knowledge and morals and ethics, whereas, and then we meet him in First Class and like, yeah, he's kind of like this flirtatious guy, but that's more fun to watch than it is like an issue that he has to overcome.
Right.
And so it was nice to watch him kind of like almost be kind of broken a little bit and to refine himself. Because, he does lose his very close friend at the end of the movie. Mystique abandons him for his new close friend, Magneto. And they go off and do their separate thing. He's left with this school that, kind of falls apart some way, somehow. And then when that falls apart, it's like, then what does he have left?
And he loses Moira, too.
And he loses Myra because he has to erase her memories. And so it was kind of nice to watch him rekindle that, kind of discover why he has his mutant ability and what he can do with it for good and all that jazz. So
cool. Yeah. So just a really fun film. I mean, it has its flaws, as we both mentioned, but I think it's definitely well thought out. And I think because it is so bold and it pulls it off, like a movie like this shouldn't work. It should be a mess, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
So speaking of messes,
I gave this an 8 out of 10, by the way.
Oh, Kelsey, we are
the
same.
Crazy.
I'm interested. This next one may be different, though, because as I alluded to, I think it's a mess, but we'll talk about it.
No, I agree.
This is X-Men Apocalypse.
No, my first note for this movie is this movie's so fucking random. That's literally the first thing I wrote down because we have to mention we did get an end credit scene at the end of Days of Future Past,
and it was teasing Apocalypse,
and it was teasing this, and it was just so random, like came out of left field.
Let me get your synopsis, and then you can dive into your take on this film because I know you were texting me saying it's not that bad. I think it's pretty good, but I'm interested on rewatch. What you think?
Oh my god, I didn't make a synopsis for this one. I think I was just so disappointed that I couldn't even write one for this.
What do you want? Make one up on the spot.
Okay, it's been like a week since I've watched this movie. Okay, so this guy, the villain, is like, he's like a cult leader basically, where he thinks that Like, everyone thinks that he's, like, the reason. I don't even know. Like, I don't even know. I can't even put it in words. So, basically, they have to stop this guy. Oh, Scott Summers comes to the school, and he meets, like, a young Jean Grey, and we kind of follow them. Oh, Jean Grey is coming into, like, the Dark Phoenix storyline.
Hmm.
This is not as articulate as my other synopses are, but you know what? That's just should go to
Lots
show
of
how messy this film is.
well, and that's the thing is lots of New Mutants. Apocalypse. Again, it's that thing where it's like X-Men Last
Mm,
Stand. It's like the vaccine, Jean Grey as Dark Phoenix. It's like you have two stories, pick one. Because it just doesn't really come together. Like the fact that they're new, like you could explore like the school, because we really haven't seen a lot of that in this trilogy. We haven't seen a lot of the school and like what it's
right.
like to just live as a student at that age. For like again, Scott Summers, Jean, Nightcrawler. So it's interesting that they go with that, but then like there's also that apocalypse angle, and then the apocalypse stuff just totally consumes the rest. And it, what are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, and then we see Magneto living, like, a simple life in Poland. He's just
Mm-hmm.
working at a factory, but then
Mm-hmm.
one day he saves, like, one of his coworkers, and one of them, like, finds out about it, or maybe they saw him, like, do it with his powers.
Yeah.
So then, I didn't like, even when, like you said, like, Michael Fassbender gives an excellent performance as Magneto. So, like, whenever he's on screen, you're
Right.
entertained.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like how they literally gave him the same villain origin story twice. Like, we already saw him lose a loved one, and that's the reason why he kind of, like, goes crazy and, like, hunts down Sebastian Shaw. In this one, we watch him lose his wife and daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Very sad. But this already happened for him. So now this is just the same rage and
Mm-hmm.
and revenge he needs to,
Right.
like, take on to, propel him for the rest of the film. We
Right.
already saw that of Magneto. I wish it was something different,
Mm-hmm.
where it felt
But
like just, like, real quick to
yeah.
finish my thought. In the original series, like, his antagonist was, like, always humans, and the US government, like, specifically, like, trying to implement laws and regulations on mutants. Like, that was always the problem he was combating. Where, like, in this one, it's like something different. It's like, okay, we started in first class, we're just meeting everyone. He has to fight down the person who killed his mom. Okay, then Days of Future Past fucks up the timeline. Everything that you saw in the original series trilogy doesn't matter anyway, because
Right.
Days of Future Past just changed it all. And then
Right.
this one is just like a whole. I think they, like, after they wrote Days of Future Past, they were like, well, now what? you
Yeah,
know?
because I feel like you've gotten a lot of that Charles Magneto backstory, and the Days of Future Past ending with two of them older, and Magneto's like, I would have, liked to trade in some of that for like a few more good days or whatever he says. And you see them playing chess, like they've already kind of like fleshed out their backstory. So now it's just like, what I feel like this was almost like, what can we do with this cast, and how can we introduce Scott and Jean? Like it really did feel like that. It was like, how do we introduce more of them, and Storm, young Storm. How
Yes,
do,
we finally get introduced
who
to a young
who honestly
Storm.
I'll say does more in this film than I think she does in any of the other ones.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think it's because people took note and was like, "What did you do with her in Days of Future Past? What the hell?" And then they fixed it. But like, yeah, like you said, it's just there's so much like, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Feeling to it. And Apocalypse, I guess, is a big villain in the comics or whatever. But I gotta say, Oscar Isaac, one of my favorite actors, but he is awful in this movie.
That's
And it's
Oscar Isaac under
yeah,
that blue
isn't
paint.
it unbelievable? That's
Hold
Oscar
on.
Isaac. And
Let,
the thing is he it's not even he's bad. It's just he has a performance, and then what they do is they put this weird sound filter on him, so he
mm,
sounds like every time he screams, it sounds like Chewbacca. So he's just like,
yeah.
oh, and his voice is deep, but it's not like Darth Vader deep. It's like weird. It feels like it's filtered. It just feels fake. His makeup's fine, but again, like it turns into a big CGI fest at the end too, which I don't
Mhm.
love. And it's like
Yeah.
I just feel like yeah, why continue a story if you don't have a good enough story to tell? And if you want to introduce Scott and Jean, then why not just make it about the school, and then maybe make some other threat about, or maybe even make Apocalypse come to the school and make it all about the school. That's why Harry Potter's so great. It's because it's all there's a
Mm,
lot of big stakes, but it's all in the confines of that school. So you get those
right.
moments with the kids and stuff. Where I feel like X-Men just never really tapped into too much. They did a little bit with X2, but um, yeah, I think Apocalypse is terrible. I'll jump right into it. He's my LVP. He is just
Apocalypse?
yeah, it's just
Okay.
it's a waste of a villain. I just don't love. I just don't love it. Like every time he's on screen, honestly, the moments with Jean and Scott are good, but every time Apocalypse shows up and it's that storyline, I was nodding off. I was sleepy, and I watched it this morning,
Mm.
and it's fresh in my brain. But even now, I'm like I'm trying to remember exactly what the specifics of his stuff were, and it's really hard because
Yeah.
yeah, it's just not. I didn't like it.
I never enjoy a villain where I don't understand what they want because
Mhm,
he explodes all of the nukes. He gets rid of all the nukes. So
mhm,
it's not like he wants mass destruction. Does he want power? He wants like
right.
mutant like to take over for humans. Like I
But
don't
he's
know what he
also
wants.
Apocalypse, so is it the end of the world? Like, what is he? Yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
yeah.
we could talk about some merits though. I mean, I do like the casting of Scott Summers. I think he's great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm blanking on his name now, but
The actor,
yeah.
his name's like Ty
I,
Sheridan.
yes. Wow,
Is that his
Kelsey,
name?
you're nail. You should do some trivia. You should
I
enter into some trivia
Dylan, I
leagues.
was just thinking about this before we got on. We need to find a bar that does Marvel trivia night because we would tear it up because I need to. We need to
Let's
find
do it.
one day.
Um, yeah. So what are some other like merits? Like because it's not all bad, you know.
It's not all bad. I'm looking. You know what? I have to say, you know what? I'll say my LVM because you
Okay.
said yours.
Yeah.
Mine was Scott, unfortunately, just because
Oh.
I feel like he was kind of like our catalyst to getting into the school again. You know, it's about him trying to like figure out his powers and control them and everything. He was kind of, he was kind of like the rogue, if you will, into
Okay.
this movie. And I feel like he didn't really do much. Like we saw him in the first half, and then the second half, we kind of forgot about him. When if it functioned like a movie in the MCU, he would have had some big heroic moment at the end that like made him who he was, and then
Right.
someone would have came over and been like, "Congratulations, you're an X-Men now." You know,
Mhm.
like there's something better would have happened for him, but he kind of fell flat for me for the rest of the film. So I had to make him my LVM.
Okay.
My MVM for the film, I don't know if you have the same one,
We might. Let's see.
is Peter Maximoff.
I'm gonna actually, so you know, I'm not lying. Look at that.
It's Quicksilver because he is the saving grace of this film.
Yep.
He has the best moments. I personally think that he has the best storyline because his whole agenda is not necessarily to fight Apocalypse. He just wants to find his dad
Hmm.
and tell him like, "Hey, I'm your son." Like,
I'll tell you right now. Every single mutant in that building dies, including Professor X, including Moira, who's not even a mutant, including Mystique. They all die if it weren't for him.
yes,
They
and
all
that they
blow
have
up.
a great little slow-mo scene again with
It's
part
and
2.
and that's the thing is they know exactly what worked the first time, and they do bring that in. It's just they don't bring enough of it in. That worked so well the first time. The second time, it's like we've seen it before, but because it's in a whole nother scenario, and the first time it was like breaking out of jail and like getting past someone. It was more of like the villainous move. But here it's more of the heroic move. It's the saving, and that's why I think
Yeah.
it's such a good arc. Because the first one, he's kind of just this punk teenager. He's like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll help you. I'm
Yeah.
cool. I'm the shit. I'm yawning. You guys are talking too slow." And then here it's like, no, I'm going to save the day. And it honestly makes him a more likable character, I think, too. For
Yeah.
sure.
One of my favorite moments with him is when Mystique, Peter, and Hank are all captured after the school explodes, and
Hmm.
they're kind of in that prison. When he first wakes up and he sees Hank as in his beast form, he says, what's wrong with you? Is that going to happen to all of us?" It's just so
It's
funny. Like,
it's
of
because
course,
he also saw Mystique blue too, so it's like he thinks everyone just turns blue after a
yeah, he's like,
while.
"Oh my god, like, is that going to happen to me?" Like,
Right, he's already got the silver, so
yeah, yeah, exactly. He's just so what I like about him is that he works as like a comic relief, where I
Mhm.
feel like before we kind of didn't have one in one of these films.
Yeah, like I said, it's very heavy, and you
Yeah,
need that. And I guess they try to make Beast a little bit of a comedic relief, but even then, I don't think he is. Days of Future Past, I mean, like I guess it's Quicksilver for the part he's in. But again,
Yeah.
again, it's like a little tease, and now we finally get him full on action sequence. I don't have a problem with Scott Summers in this movie. I do like his arc. I like the whole bully thing. I think it's interesting. I always think it's interesting when we see them in the real world. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's some of the coolest stuff. And to see like the teacher literally be like, go to the principal's office for disrupting class. And it's like, this kid has a problem. It reminded me of when I was in school, when I was ever seated in the back and I asked, can I sit in the front because I needed my glasses and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have them then. And the teacher was like, stop disrupting class. And I'd be
Yeah.
like, I can't see. And it reminded me of
Yeah.
that, not to the
Yeah.
extent, obviously he
No.
would make things explode with his vision. I
Right.
just
Right.
couldn't
Right.
see. But it's like, I feel like I missed out on a lot when I was a kid because I didn't know how to speak up for myself without fear of being in trouble for talking about a disability, my vision. And
Right.
it's not a disability like I'm not defined by it, but it is a part of me that is not as abled as others, and it's
Right.
just one of
Sure.
those things. Am I hearing too? It's like there's a lot of things that I think this universe and these movies parallel well, and that was like one thing I related to. So I like that aspect, but I agree once we get to the battles and stuff again, like it just
Yeah.
feels like yeah, and I think that's just the movie itself. The battle is just whatever,
He just feels a little forgotten because even once we get him at the school and he kind of like has his powers under wraps, it then becomes about Jean, and then
Mhm.
he's just kind of like Jean's boyfriend, which is fine. Like I'm fine with the side boyfriend
Right.
character.
Especially since they didn't really flesh out their relationship in the first trilogy.
Yeah. And it
Um,
just, yeah, and it's the same thing where it's like, and then Jean has this whole Dark Phoenix thing happening in her, and like she's almost the saving grace at the end of the film. It just feels like, oh, who I also really like in this film is young Kurt Wagner.
yes,
He's fun too.
yes,
I like
yes,
him.
Nightcrawler. Yeah, he's great. Again, yeah, just a lot of fun. Like they knew what they did well in the other movies. They knew X2 was one of the best openings because of Nightcrawler, and they knew they
Hmm.
could really, capitalize on that. I will say, Angel. We alluded to it earlier. What are your thoughts on Angel? Because that was a
Oh,
little weird to me. Because
is his name also Angel?
yeah, I think
Because
so.
Angel is also the Kravitz character. What's her name?
Right. Well,
Zoe Kravitz.
Zoe Kravitz's character. Well, she's like, yeah, she's Angel, but then there's also this Angel. But it seems I feel like this is the same Angel we saw in Last Stand, right? The one who was trying to clip his wings off. But then when he joins the
Yeah.
school, he seems a little young. So is he really like 30 and this is like a 12, 13-year-old Angel? Because this kid looked a little older, but the kid from Last Stand looked younger. So
Well,
it's very confusing.
we have to remember that Days of Future Past, like everything that happened in the original trilogy, doesn't matter now because of Days of Future Past. So
Yeah.
this is a timeline where Angel, embraced himself and is a cage fighter, and then is part of Apocalypse's team.
Honestly, that's
That's his story now.
yeah, honestly, that it actually helps a lot because I was wondering. I was like,
No, you
he's
have to
so
remind
like,
yourself.
yeah. I was like,
No,
wait,
I
I thought
know.
he was not evil, and I thought he was insecure about his wings. I don't even know, but
Because I
I
guess
really
in this new timeline, maybe a vaccine was never created. But then if a vaccine's never created, then how is Rogue touching Bobby at the end?
I think she might have gloves, but I don't
Oh,
know.
maybe. I'll have to rewatch.
It's just interesting. Well, I don't want to rewatch this movie ever again, but like it's one of those things where I'm just like I just don't
Well,
know why.
that moment's at the end of Days of Future Past, not
Oh, right.
Apocalypse.
Okay. Yeah. I'll watch that.
That one I'll
But
rewatch.
it's like there's just so much going on, and it
Yeah.
just I don't know. I think they definitely dropped the ball. I think it was not meant to be more than like it could have just been X-Men First Class even, and it would have been fine. Like I don't even think you need Days of Future Past. It's a great movie, but I think in terms of fleshing out the backstory, you get enough with Magneto and Charles in the first one. You don't need two more films, and then let alone another one, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. So it's just very interesting the way they took the direction. Yeah, what did you rate this? Because I rated it low.
5 out of 10.
I went 3 out of 10.
Okay.
I just really I there are parts I like, but for all the parts I don't like, it just I don't know.
I think the reason why I didn't go lower than 5 was because maybe if 5 is average, then I probably would say then maybe closer to 4. It's a little bit more below average than it is an average movie.
I'd say average is like maybe like 6 though. Like 5 is still like lower half. I don't even know.
I guess.
Yeah.
But Peter was really the saving grace for me for this movie, which is why.
Yeah. I
I didn't
think
go
that
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 low.
does it too. What did you think of Logan in this as Project X? I think his name is right. Is
Oh,
it Project X?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing. I think Hugh Jackman makes a cameo or is in in all of these movies to a certain extent. He's been in
Yeah.
every single movie to
Even
some
Deadpool 2,
capacity.
he's on the little the toy.
Yes.
Yeah. hmm Yeah, like
Yeah.
he's in every movie and it's great because
I
he is
thought it
great.
was I thought that it was interesting. I watched this movie with a friend and he pointed out to me, isn't it kind of weird that Jean and Logan exchange this moment when she's a teenager and then like later on in life like Logan kind of crushes on her, but then again timelines change, so maybe
Yeah, and
Logan
we even
crushing
see
on Jean
Rogue.
never
Yeah,
happens.
when Rogue first meets Logan too, she's crushing on him too. I mean, maybe it's just like a thing. He's like the hunky daddy character that all the little young girls are flirting with. Who knows? Or she just
Hunky
really
daddy.
genuinely wanted to tap into his brain. Like it didn't have to be all about that, Kels.
Yeah.
Um, no, I
Listen, I this was something I didn't think that. This was pointed out to me by another person and I
gotcha.
was like, "Oh yeah, that's kind of
Yeah,
gross," but I didn't even go there. So,
yeah. X-Men Apocalypse is not great. So if we're ranking all these in the grand scheme of things, so Days of Future Past is now at our top, right? Out of these six,
yes.
because it's our only eight. And then between First Class and X2, we both gave those sevens. What do we think goes above what? I would.
Wait,
I'm leaning.
what else did we give a 7?
We gave X2 a seven last week. Because this trilogy is very clearly Days of Future Past, First Class, and then Apocalypse at the bottom. So now, if we're filtering it in with last week's rankings, if we're trying to compile a master ranking, do you think
Hmm.
X2 or First Class? I have one I'm leaning toward, but we can always flip a coin. As we know, the Marvel bracket went so well with that.
X2 or First Class?
Yeah, we both gave those 7 out of 10s.
Um, I think First Class.
Okay. I
You're leaning towards X2?
don't know. I think X2 maybe hits better peaks, but that last act of First Class I think puts it above. So we'll put First Class at number 2. So then it's X2. And then we have, I think, X-Men. And then this will be interesting between our bottom because you gave both X-Men The Last Stand and um, X-Men Apocalypse a 5 out of 10. I gave X-Men The Last Stand a 5 out of 10. I gave this Apocalypse 3 out of 10. So does that put Apocalypse at the bottom then?
According to my math, it would be Apocalypse, Last Stand,
Mm-hmm.
X-Men, X-Men 2, First Class, Days of Future Past.
All right, cool. So that's our ranking right now. That was from bottom to the top, by the way, for anyone listening.
Yes.
Apocalypse is not our number one,
No, 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 no,
but
no.
yeah, from bottom to the top. So that'll be our ranking now. It'll be interesting in the next week to filter in these 3 films that we're talking about next week, which is the Wolverine trilogy. So we're talking about X-Men Origins Wolverine, we're talking about the Wolverine, and we're talking about
Mhm.
Logan. Which is not anywhere close to any of those titles, but it is probably the
Yeah.
coolest title just because it's simple. And the movie itself is just so. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but
I
I'm very
mean,
excited
we
to
all
rewatch
know.
Logan.
We all know what's gonna go down when we talk about Logan.
or rather, what's going to go up. You know what I mean? In the ranking.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I was like, "What?"
Spoiler alert: it's the number 1 X-Men movie ever made. But we'll be talking about it next week. Maybe our opinions will change. Maybe we'll rewatch it and be like, "Nah, Days of Future Past is better." Who knows? Or maybe we'll think New Mutants or Dark Phoenix are.
Yeah, maybe. We also have
Yeah.
Deadpool in there we gotta
Yeah,
throw into the
true.
mix, so.
He's our wild card. So yeah, next week we'll be talking about X-Men Origins Wolverine, The Wolverine, and Logan. The week after we'll be talking about Deadpool and Deadpool 2, and the week after that we'll be talking about Dark Phoenix and New Mutants, which will be a doozy for sure, judging how Apocalypse was. Kelsey, thank you so much. As always, it's always a pleasure. Where can they find you
Thank
on the
you.
internet? Where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Kelsey A. Kilpatrick. You can find me on TikTok, KOZ13, or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, KOZ Productions.
Cool. And you can find me at Dylan_Randazzo on Twitter. You can find me at TikTok at DylanRandazzo417. And you can find me right here if you're watching on video at the Dill Pickle Movie Network. If you're listening to us on audio, give us a rating. 5 out of 5 is the preferred rating, but if you don't feel that way, just give us some sort of rating. Give us some comment review on Apple Podcasts. So download us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you can find podcasts, we're there. And if you like us so much, you want to see our faces, check out Dill Pickle Movie Network, where you can see us on video form, because we do video and audio hybrid, and it's always a lot of fun. Thank you for bearing with my lack of movies and posters behind me. I'm in a different corner of the house, of the apartment. I love Lamp. So I will.
It's an Anchorman reference right at the end.
Yeah, Anchorman. Yeah, why not? Another movie I'd love to talk about on this podcast if it had anything to do with Marvel, and maybe someday we'll find a way to fit it in.
Maybe.
So thank you so much, and till next time, this is Dylan and Kelsey signing off.